I'm your host, Brian.
I'm Paul.
And welcome to episode 3 of Knoxville Financial Q&A.
Today's episode, we're going to focus on just one question. You guys have sent in many questions, but this particular one has pretty much been consistent throughout.
General consensus was, how much do I need to have saved to retire comfortably for East Tennessee, for us? More preferably Knoxville. We didn't want to include everywhere like Oak Ridge and all the specific entities, but we'll talk on that a little bit.
Big picture, this question, there's a ton of different answers, in all honesty. But just to basically zoom way out, there was a CNBC article that was released just yesterday, actually, and it took a study from Northwestern Mutual that said you should have $1.46 million to retire comfortably. In that same article, though, Fidelity recommends savers have 4 times their annual salary by age 45 saved up and 8 times by age 60 to be on track. I was looking at some of my clients after I read that. Most of my clients are, closer to 60, and that number is kind of pretty accurate.
I assumed it would be a little bit more than that because I've read, some different things, but I also look at it from the standpoint of I'm kind of in a different generational bracket.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have a big giant, question mark towards that 20, 30 years from now compared to now. And so, yeah, I could see that being a lot more accurate for like today. But then you also have to think about look at the inflationary period that we just had and how dramatic it was in a short period of time. And think about that for my generation and for people that are currently 40 and 20 years or 25 years from now, you have another dramatic inflationary event. All those numbers could get skewed. And if you're kind of planning to shoot for an inflation-adjusted 1.4 in today's money, what does that look like for my generation? That's a pretty big, I'd say that probably puts that number closer to 4 or 5 million.
Yeah, well, okay, so just thinking out loud here, your clients have a longer runway typically than mine do.
Sure.
Right? And so my clients come in, they're generally older than Brian's clients, and they basically have what they have and they're ready to retire. So whatever that number is, that's what we have to work with to create a plan. Hopefully it works. And in their case, most of the time, my clients are predominantly engineers out in Oak Ridge, and they're excellent savers and they live well below their means. And there's typically plenty of money there. Even if it's not 1.46, the other things about what they have is excellent benefits.
Yeah, benefits matter. This goes back to kind of what we talk about all the time is I've always said income is the only outcome that matters. When you start thinking about, well, how much money do I need saved? Well, if you have a $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year pension income, you may not have to save as much as the person who doesn't have that. So having all of those factors, this goes back to what we said originally. The point of this entire video is there's so many different factors at play. You got to stop and look at each individual situation and how it applies. Do you have rental properties? Do you have other income outside of maybe it's business income? Maybe you own a business and you sell it off and you have an income coming in from that for years. Every situation is different.
Of course.
And so, yeah, I think all of that matters. And something I always bring up to my clients, most people don't really truly plan for retirement. I've always used the joke that most people plan more for a 24-hour wedding day than they do for a 24-year retirement. And so it's funny how that translates so many times. The question I always ask people when we're talking about retirement savings is, do you spend more money during the week when you're working or on the weekends when you're not? And what happens when every day becomes the weekend? I was looking at our income by zip code, to your point on saving 4 times or 8 times or 6 times, whatever the simple math was that Fidelity was talking about. So for 37934 for Farragut, its average income of $135,000 a year, and this is based on Data Commons, but it's an analytical website. 37922 was $126,638. 37932 was $109,900. 37938 was $80,868. And so I'm not going to go the whole way down the list. We'll put it up on screen where you can see the numbers here. But it goes to your point on, if you just simplified it and said 4 times, I need to have 4 times my income at this age. I need to have 10 times my income at this age. I mean, at a 10 times multiple, you got 1.35 million. To your point, it literally lands perfectly. So if you live in Farragut and you're probably in that Farragut area most of the time, you're going to be just fine. That's average income.
If you look at my clients, a lot of times they might have that or more. Generally, they have more than that saved up in their 401k. But because their pension is so good, and then you add Social Security on top of that, I mean, they're almost making what they were making when they were working. The other question is, are you actually ready to retire? Because a lot of people have this. I know a lot of my clients, the engineer guys in particular, like they have it nailed down to the second that they're going to retire. They retire for a couple of months. They realize, hey, that's their purpose in life. It seems like, right? Being a great engineer or whatever you're doing, and they're just not happy, just not doing anything. So a lot of times,
boring.
Very boring. And they'll go back and do some consulting work or something like that, which adds additional income. And then they can possibly be making more than they were making when they were actually employed.
Or over-prepared. And then we go back to, I think we talked about this during one of our other episodes, it was the RMD challenge. If you become over-prepared because you've got a good pension and you got good benefits and you got good income coming in, and then you start back to work, we weren't planning on having that happen, and now we have to plan on that. Yeah, that's, and you brought up an age range matters. When you look at planning, you look at, for us, my age bracket has to sit there and go, well, should I count on Social Security? Is it going to be there for us? I don't know.
Right.
Pensions almost don't exist anymore for most of, I know that when I had a job, which was a very long time ago, but the idea was those weren't being presented to me as benefits packages. So it's crazy to think about that's pretty much gone for the most part. So now all of that planning becomes more important. And I think that's the one thing, I pulled this up just briefly because I wanted to do this. We'll do this live, and you can see we'll do a screen record here. I'm going to record it right now. But compound interest, I think most people get to that point where they go, okay, well, this is great that you're telling me I need 1.4, or let's say it's inflation adjusted for 3 or 4 million. How do I get there? What does that look like? And I think most people have a breakdown on actually implementing strategies to get where they want to go because they just get lost. It's like, okay, well, now what? Or, we got a 2-year-old and another one on the way. Life gets hectic. So you start looking, okay, well, so the average, this is average, 35 to 44 had an average retirement savings account between 91,000 and 141,000. So you figure if you fall in that 35 to 40-year-old range, well, what do I need to have moving forward? Or what do I need to save moving forward to get there? So 141,000, which we're going to the tippy top of the range if you had 141,000, and you've got 20 years to save. If you could average a 9% rate of return and put away $1,000 a month, you end up $1.5 million. So if the average stayed the same, you're right on par.
Okay, so we started with the national average, and now let's try to kind of zoom into the East Tennessee area again. I know Brian mentioned incomes per zip code, but Tennessee is a great state to retire in. The fact that we don't have a state income tax is huge. And what that means is your Social Security doesn't get a state income tax, your 401k, pensions, none of that stuff gets a state income tax. Of course, you're still subject to federal tax, but compared to most states, it's a great place to retire. What we do have, though, is a high sales tax, which kind of works out in your favor because, like a lot of my clients, like I said before, they are not big spenders. They live below their means. They don't buy a lot of things, so they're not paying a whole bunch of sales tax on...
Proportionally.
Yeah. So it works out well. And because of that, I think the averages in Tennessee, particularly East Tennessee, and maybe it's skewed a little bit now because it's become such a popular place where people want to move here and retire. But I think our averages are probably lower than 1.46 million.
Probably.
Just, based on the tax savings. And based on a couple of things, really. Like I said, a bunch of my guys have really great pensions, and a lot of times they don't even touch their 401k savings after we roll it to an IRA or something like that. They don't need it.
Yeah.
They continue to live the lifestyle that they were used to without even touching the money that they saved up. So I just ran basically three scenarios here. So a lot of this depends on the lifestyle that you live, right?
Yep.
So based on, I looked at my clients and the assets that they have and how they live their lifestyles, and I put together a really general guideline for East Tennessee. So if you just live below your means and you just want a normal lifestyle and your house is paid off, you can probably retire on $500,000 to $800,000. This is actual numbers based on clients that I have. If you're just a person that wants to live a little bit more of an extravagant lifestyle, you can do it between $800,000 and $1.2 million.
So what, like travel on vacation once or twice a year? Maybe taking the family to a Disney trip.
Yeah,
taking the grandkids.
That would be our comfortable number. So the 1.46
would be the people that can go a couple times a year, or the people that can take the whole extended family to the European vacation.
The 1.46 number basically translates to the 800 to 1.2.
Yeah,
is what I'm saying, because we live here. Right?
Yeah,
and so if you want a very, very comfortable lifestyle, what that 1.46 number was relating to here, it would be between 1.2 and 1.8 million. So we are on the very comfortable side of comfortable at that range.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, you think about if somebody lives in California with 1.46, it won't go very far. By the time you factor in their state income tax and then all the taxes for property and all the craziness that goes on, that matters. It all impacts everything. The other thing when it comes down to planning, though, which is something we have to talk about too, so impacts to that number that we're probably not calculating, and we can bring this up too, is there's a website that was Elder Care Law of Tennessee. This is in no way an endorsement, but they had done some how much does long-term care costs, and I think this is shocking for both of us. This was annual costs. So if you have adult services 5 days a week, so that means 5 days a week, I'm guessing you have somebody come check on you or your loved ones. Mm-hmm. It was between $12,000 and $25,000 per year. I'm going to skip a few options here and go straight to like assisted living. So assisted living was between $36,000 and $50,000 a year. So, if you've got somebody living on 60, 70, 80, and now they have to provide a $50,000 a year assisted living cost, that can severely impact somebody's, amount of money saved. Nursing home, a private room in nursing home ranged from between $76,000 to $88,000 per year. Crazy. Because if you think I've got 1.4 million, I fall in that really good range. We're one catastrophic thing away, or spousal, any form of health event away from now. A lot of that income gets just siphoned away. And then, like, I'll use my own example. You know, I think my grandmother lived for almost 9 years with dementia in a assisted living home or in a nursing home. You know, you figure $88,000 a year over a 9-year period of time. If you don't have that income, you got to start planning for stuff like that.
The numbers I threw out there, you know, the 500 to 800, depending on your lifestyle, that kind of thing, that's without pensions. And so if you're in that position where you have $1 million and you feel like you're comfortable with that amount and you can retire, one of the, I would say, the biggest things you have to look out for. Let's say it was 2007. You have $1 million, the market's doing well, you feel totally confident in your lifestyle, that money's going to last you a long time. And then 2008 and 2009 comes around.
Kneecaps.
And you get the sequence of returns right as soon as you retire. And that's a horrible situation. That's almost the worst case scenario that actually happened to some people. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, you kind of have to plan for that as well, because those things do happen. We see them on a 10-year cycle almost. So sequence of returns are a huge factor, and if you get it right when you retire, it could be really, really bad, detrimental almost.
Yeah, and something we haven't even brought up is like tools in the tool belt to use for that. And this isn't in no way an endorsement for a product or any specific product, but just the general structure. I think it gets frowned upon to use the term annuities.
You said it.
You can't say the A word.
You said it.
And so, you know, if you just remove that word annuity and you replace it with the word pension, the idea there is you're creating a self-funded pension, and that can insulate you from some of those sequence of returns things. You know, that can insulate you from, hey, we'll take money from here instead of take money from a 401k while the 401k is down and can rebound. So, you know, having some of those tools in your tool belt become extremely important. It's a way for, I know you're not supposed to use the A word, but it's a way to improve or insulate your situation. And those all require just situation specific.
And
right?
If you think about it this way, a lot of the numbers that we have talked about have been based on the common 4% withdrawal rule, right? Where we're talking the A word, annuities, you know, right now, some of them, because of interest rates being what they are paying 6.5%. It's a lot higher than 4%. And, you know, we're not suggesting you take all of your assets and do something like that.
In fact, don't.
But don't. But peel off a little bit and maybe do something like that to offset any potential, you know, 2008, 2009 scenario again.
Yeah, I mean, that's that 4%, man. I don't know how I feel about that. There's times where I look at that 4% withdrawal rate and I'm like, I mean, it's really, you look at what we had over the last couple of years, very, very low interest rates, which is a realistic possibility again at some point in the future. And so when you can only get 1 or 2%, if you're trying to be very conservative and you're withdrawing 4 and you're only earning 1 or 2%, it's cannibalizing. You're actually like eating away at that principle, eroding the principle. Whereas like, you know, and right now, if you can get a CD rate of 3.5, you can almost sustain your 4% withdrawal with safe money. So, you know, I don't know how I feel about that. I feel like it's a in the periods of good or average interest rates, it works perfect.
And lower inflation.
Yeah, and in a period of, and that's inflation. I mean, what was inflation during like the COVID stuff was like what, almost 9.5%. So you figure like you're losing a purchasing power to the tune of 9.5%. Your safe money's earning 4 or 5 and paying out 4 or 5, but you're eroding half of your purchasing power. That's crazy.
Yeah.
You know, things like that matter. It's hard to account for every scenario. I think you could drive yourself insane trying to account for every scenario, but at least talking about it. You know, if you're meeting with other people and they're not bringing up things like that, That's a very important conversation that you may or may not be having with your financial person.
Yeah, I think if you get anything from this, I don't think there's a magic number.
No.
Everybody's going to have a different number.
Yeah, some people are going to need 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 million because they want to travel or they want to, have vacation homes for the family to visit. Some people could probably live on $500,000 or less. Like, hey, look, I just want to, sit on my back porch and rock in my rocking chair and enjoy life and grill on my patio, and who cares?
Yep.
Yeah, maybe just delay Social Security income, or there's probably other options too. We're the stuff we're not thinking about. We're put on the spot. We're filming this. We're trying to kind of have a conversation and make it conversational.
Even if we talked scenarios where your house is paid off, and that's a big thing. That helps a lot, obviously, when you retire. But you don't ever really own your home, it seems like, right? You're always paying property taxes that you have to factor in. And guess what? They don't go down. They only go up. And so depending on where you live in East Tennessee, that could have a big impact on,
for sure,
the amount you're saving for retiring. So just because of where you live, there's other options here in East Tennessee that can be much more affordable.
I'd say thank you for joining us for episode 3 of the Knoxville Financial Q&A.
And again, these numbers are very general. Basically, there is no magic number. To sum it up, it just depends on the lifestyle you want to live once you retire. And if there's not enough money there, you might have to make some adjustments.
Sometimes wait 4 years, 3 years,
that's
5
a possibility.
years.
Yep. Sometimes there's too much money, and then you might have to talk to us about a trust situation.
Tax problems.
Yep. So to close it out, thanks again for watching. This is going to be something that we're going to kind of focus on going forward, is possibly just answering just one question and spending the whole episode on it.
Yeah, because, if the questions end up being situational, it's not a simple answer. So
yeah. So keep sending them in, and we'll get to them maybe just one at a time, or maybe we'll do an episode with a whole bunch at once again.
Sure.
So we appreciate you watching.
Signing off.
Thanks.